Today we're going to talk about LEQs. I like writing essays, so I like sessions like this. All right, so let me go over this. A week's worth of work due in 3 hours. Good luck with that. Yeah, bye forever. No, you'll be fine. Just try to give yourself short goals. All right, so I'll try to be quick with this then. Okay, so LEQs. All right, so you'll be fine. Okay, so just a quick rundown of LEQs, and then we're going to do that prompt right there. So, exactly. All right, so a quick rundown of LEQs. It's 15% of your score. It's worth 6 points on the rubric. You can get one in comparison, causation, or CCOT. There is no periodization anymore. Woohoo. What else do you get? LEQs, 15%, worth 6 points. Oh, how much time do you get for LEQs? You get 40 minutes, which honestly is plenty of time. You can do this, okay? So in terms of how should you, yeah, you can totally do this. But in terms of how do you attack an LEQ? What's the steps you should take to attack the LEQ? And this is the order in which you should do them. And then we're going to do all those steps together, or as many as we can. Your first step, your very first step, when you sit down, you're ready to write the LEQ, is to read the prompt, break it down so you understand it. And yes, that's it. All right, read the prompt and break it down so you understand it. So let's do that with this one. Here's the prompt we're going to use. Let's make this bigger. Evaluate the extent to which the market revolution fostered a change in women's lives in the United States. So you have to be really clear on what it's asking you. You might, yeah, very much change. First, you're really looking for that keyword that's telling you which skill they want you to write about, right? And you guys already picked up on that. In this case, it says change. So we know that it's asking about change, right? We know that you're about to write a CCOT essay. But what's important here is the evaluate the extent to which. That right there is you get to now argue, is it a lot of change or is it not a lot of change? And that's something that you have to be clear about in your essay. What are you arguing? You can't just say, I don't know, it changed, but it didn't. It is a new thing. Yeah. So this is in the last summer, they revamped all the history ones one more time. And so that it's not always going to be clear which skill they are focused on. That's kind of frustrating that they did that, honestly, because I think it's hard enough for you to have to figure out what they're asking too. Yeah, it was always argumentative, but now the way that the prompt is written will just look different. And so this is kind of more like what they'll look at. So you have to think about words like factors, what led to. If it says something like that, then it's talking about cause. What happened as a result of. That's talking about effect. So you have to kind of look for those key words. I'm going to try to find a list of them and upload them to the community because I think that's going to be really useful. I think I know of a teacher that made a list of them, so I'll find that and upload it. So the first thing you have to do is read the prompt and break it down. And sometimes what I even do is kind of rewrite the prompt in a way and just make it easier. So if we were to rewrite this prompt to make it just more clear, it's how much did women's lives, American women's lives, change because of the market revolution? I'm just kind of rearranging the prompt, right? So if I kind of think of it that way, it just is a little bit more straightforward, right? This is an easier question to deal with than this, even though they're asking the same thing. So that's something you could do, potentially rewrite it. make it more clear, just to really like give you a sense. And, you know, you want to be careful with rewriting it in case you don't understand the original prompt. You don't want to rewrite it in a way that's wrong. But I think that's kind of helpful. Okay, then the next thing that I would do is to start brainstorming. Brainstorm answers. So I would draw a little table, a little like T-chart, right? Changes, continuities. Because like, you know, you guys kind of automatically went to it changed a lot. But the first thing you got to do is brainstorm and kind of decide whether or not you're going to argue that it changed a lot or that it didn't, right? And so I would just make a quick chart and brainstorm this. So let's think about it. So like, what are some ways in which women's, so Jasper, you don't need continuities, but you have to figure out what you're going to argue. How much did women's lives change? And you got to figure out which way you're going to argue that. So the first thing you want to do is to just brainstorm ways that it changed, and then brainstorm ways that it didn't. And then you can kind of step back and decide, oh, shoot, it changed more than it stayed the same, or it stayed the same more than it changed. And that will give you a more clear argument. And then to get your complexity point, you could use one of those paragraphs. Exactly. Right. So no matter what you're going to write about, brainstorm both sides. It just helps you like kind of come up with some ideas. So let's brainstorm. So let's think about what are some ways that women's lives changed because of the market revolution. So remember, really quick, what's the market revolution? So when I say market revolution, what am I talking about? Make this bigger, make this smaller. Factories, yeah. Industrialization. No, you're not. There's 9 people here. Yeah, there's 9 people here. Someone's just quiet. Okay, so just to like, you know, really make sure that we know what we're talking about here. What's the market revolution? Factories, industrialization. Okay, so ways in which women's lives changed as a result of industrialization. So you've got cult of domesticity. What else? Yep. Opportunities in factories, Lowell system. What else? Anything else you can think of? So like for those of you that were like, it changed a lot. Anything else that you know of that changed? That would be this, cult of domesticity. What about, can you tie the first wave of feminism to this? Like Seneca Falls type stuff? Can you put that in terms of changes? Okay. All right. What about continuities? What are ways in which women's lives didn't change? Erie Canal expansion, lack of political rights, right? How would you tie the Erie Canal and expansion to women's lives? Because that's the important thing here. Because it's not just about American lives in general; it's just women's lives. So that would definitely be a continuity for change. Show how they were capable of handling work. Yeah, right. Well, like that would be like opportunities in factories, right? So women are given new opportunities. I mean, honestly, I think what we have here might just even be enough. But when you're brainstorming, try to come up with as much as you can. I would spend, like, give yourself at least a minute here. And give yourself at least like 1 to 2 minutes here. Like, just really try to like brain dump everything you can possibly think of that would be a change or a continuity. Western frontier, more transportation means more Western expansion. Yes, but still, how does that affect women? well, how does women's lives change because of that? So, all right, so we'll leave it at this, and then we'll keep moving forward. They had to farm, some cases. Okay, so let's just leave it at this. So again, you want to brainstorm as many answers as you can. But once you like figure out, make sure here you gotta like really make sure you know which skill the question is focused on. Women get involved in reform movements that rise from economic changes. Here we go. Reform movements. Yeah, sometimes it's like one answer is going to be like an obvious one, and then you're like, oh, shoot, what else am I going to write? Reform movements, right? So this is like Seneca Falls. Okay, so we'll leave it at that. And then, you want to brainstorm as many answers on both sides of the skill. So that means if the question is asking about causes, I want you to think about causes and effects. If the question is asking about continuities, think about changes and continuities. Because now we have a clear winner, right? Like now you know what you want to argue. Like clearly we're going to say that it changed a lot more than it stayed the same, But if we had come up with more on this end, then I'd say, well, let's argue that. I mean, the beauty of this is you can argue whatever you want as long as you've got the evidence to back yourself up. Okay, so the next thing that I would do is write a thesis. And I would do that like on the actual booklet, on like some like scrap paper, like on the back of the question. That's where I would do all of this. That's where I would brainstorm and I would write a thesis. And I wouldn't even open up the actual paper to write the essay yet, not until I have a thesis written. So in terms of writing a thesis, let's see what you guys can do. Let's just have you guys write. Yeah, there is a formula like ACE. And actually, you kind of use ACE in the LEQ. But let's just see some sample thesis statements. So take this question. We're going to argue these things. You can choose two of those, whatever. And let's see what you guys would write for thesis statements. And then basically what you want to do in a thesis statement is like restate the question and answer it in like 2 to 3 ways. Okay, so you guys write a thesis, send it over. I'm going to give you, like a minute to do this, and then I'll copy and paste them in, and we'll look at your thesis statements. See what you got. And then I'll, kind of choose the best one, and we'll write an essay from that. So restate the question, in a way that you would in your class, and then send it over in the chat, your full thesis statement. And so there's 9 of you here, so there's 8 of you here now. Someone left. Should get 8 thesis statements. If you're not going to answer it, then send me something so I know not to wait for you. These lead to these. Like opportunities lead to reform. But like if I was writing this, I would probably choose these 2. I wouldn't even talk about this because I would then want to talk about this. But it doesn't matter how you do it. All right, 4 out of 8. You got them all. 1, 2. Okay. All right, so if you're still writing, I'll take yours in a second, and let me start going over these. If you're not sending a thesis statement, just send something so I know not to wait. Okay, so although there was the continuity for the lack of political rights, women's lives changed drastically after the market revolution due to the emergence of the cult of domesticity and new factory opportunities. Okay, so one thing that you want to make sure that you do here is actually say, I think you can kind of like reword it so that you really focus on the topic. So it's like, as a result of the market revolution, like put that first and then put this later. Women's lives changed drastically due to the emergence of the cult of domesticity, new factory opportunities. However, there was, like, even though there was a continuity for the lack of political rights, something like that would be a little bit better. So just kind of like restructuring it so that you can talk about, it just kind of like lets you be a little bit more clear, more focused. But this is good though. The market revolution fostered immense change in the lives of American women in the early 19th century as they begin to define the cult by, they begin to be defined by the cult of domesticity, changing economic opportunities. While women experienced these changes, they did not advance far in the realm of gaining political rights and opportunities. I really like the way that this one is set up. Like, it's very clear that you, in this first sentence, are going to argue that it was more of a change, a lot changed. But then it gets a little bit confusing in this last sentence. So I think you could include something like, the market revolution fostered immense change in the lives of American women in the early 19th century as they, maybe like here, as they begin to be defined by the cult of domesticity and had, like, don't just say changing economic opportunities, say what those changes were. Had more economic opportunities in factories. While women experienced these changes, they did not advance far in the realm of gaining political rights. That's fine. Okay, the market revolution was a turning point for women's roles in America because of the cult. Okay, so this one is just like it's not detailed enough, right? So this one would need a little bit more. Like, I need to know not just that it was a turning point, but how did things change, right? Like, how exactly did these things change women's lives? Women's lives drastically increased in the time of the market revolution in the home with the cult of domesticity and with increasing opportunities in factories. However, this still did not grant women the political rights they fought for. This one's pretty good. I like this one. Lives drastically changed. Let me just read it again. In the home. How many more did I get? 2? Okay. Whoa. Okay, so women's lives drastically increased. Wait, women's lives or opportunities for women? The lives didn't increase. Opportunities for women drastically increased in the time of, I mean, they do live longer, but not because of this. In the home with the cult of domesticity and with increasing opportunities in factories. However, this still did not grant women the political rights that they fought for. Good. The market revolution changed women's rights in America to a significant extent, although they still lacked the right to vote. They still gained economic rights and became involved in reform movements. Yeah, I think that's fine. I think this would get the point. Even though it's small, I think it would get the point. To a certain extent, market revolution marked a turning point in women's lives in the United States due to labor opportunities for women and their roles at home with the cult of domesticity. However, although the political rights for women were not extended in this time. Something like that. So just kind of like show that counterpoint. And then the last one. Although many changes during the 19th century, such as new opportunities in factories, as well as the reform movements that were created, the change in women's political rights was not evident at all during this time period. Okay, so yeah, be super clear about what the prompt is asking. Okay, so I mean, we kind of see the trend here, right? So you guys all wrote very similar ones, and if I were to write one, I would kind of write as a result of the market revolution, women in America, in the United States, had more opportunities to work in factories, and their role in the home became more defined. However, this period did not affect change in political rights for women, right? So it's just like the same thing as what you guys are doing. So good job with everyone. So that's your next step. Now that you have a thesis written, then I would finally open up the book where you're actually going to write things, and this is when you're going to actually start the context. So let's brainstorm some context. If we're going to write this thesis, brainstorm and write context. If you're going to write the thesis, let's choose a thesis statement. To a certain extent, I'm going to use this one. I like that one. So let's say this is going to be your thesis. Make this in a different color. So now what kinds of things would you put in your context? Previously on the market revolution, previously on America in in the 19th century, like what kinds of things do we need to know? What were women's lives like before? What other things happened before the market revolution? What's the precursor? What's the pretense to the market revolution? Good. Republican motherhood. What else? You could even, like, in the context, kind of explain a little bit more about the market revolution. So, like, what are some of those, like, key new technologies, the key changes? If this was the episode that we're about to watch, what do we need to know about America right before? Samuel Slater's textiles. Okay, so that would be like precursor to industrialization. What else? Eli Whitney, cotton gin. Is Eli Whitney, who came up with interchangeable parts? It's what's his name? Is it the same person? Okay. Really? I thought it was like Franklin something. All right. Yeah, I thought it was some other guy. Okay. So all right. So, those are all good things. So then I would just start writing the context, After during the American Revolution, the role of women in America became defined through the Republican motherhood, which made like the socialization of children and citizenship training the priority for like the Republican motherhood during the American Revolution. So this is like the context, right? So doing some before. I think I'm right? Priority for women's roles, for women. This defined the role of American women for decades until industrialization made its way from Europe, from Western Europe to the United States. New technologies such as Samuel Slater's textiles and Eli Whitney's cotton gin gave way to the market revolution, and I don't know, You like what I have there? Gave way to the market revolution and prompted industrial changes across the U.S. The shift from agriculture to factories affected gender roles because of new opportunities available to women. All right. I mean, that would give you the context, right? So, I mean, you can see what we did. All I did just now is just take each thing that you said and made it into a sentence, you know? So you go back up here, brainstorm the thesis, I mean, the context, brainstorm. Think of 2 or 3 things that you can really talk about in your context, and then you just write it, and that's your context. So just make each one, you want to make the context about, I don't know, make this yellow. Make the context about 4 to 5 sentences-ish, you know? And you don't want to talk about everything. You just want to talk about, you know, what's most important. You just want to like really highlight the most important things. So brainstorm it and then really get in there. Yeah, it's exactly like explaining it's just explaining an episode, right? So like if I'm watching an episode now about the gender roles of women after the market revolution, then the episode right before it probably was about Republican motherhood, right? Or about the like transition to agriculture, or to, you know, industrialization from agriculture. So that's what your introduction paragraph is going to look like. So now the next thing that you do, and this is where you could, okay, so let's say that the next one is going to be your complexity paragraph, okay, no matter what. So what do I mean by complexity paragraph? This could be your synthesis, or in this case, continuity, you know. Why do you do it right away? Why right here? Because if you run out of time, that's a whole point that you want to include. So if right here, right after you do the intro, you write a paragraph that's going to be focused on that complexity point, you're going to have 3 of your 6 points after 2 paragraphs, which is pretty dope. So let's say you know, and this complexity paragraph could be, so you got a choice here. Clearly you're in this one that we have, you're arguing that it changed, right? So you could here have your continuity, and that would help you. And then you'd have continuity, change. That's how your paragraphs would be set up. Or this could be a synthesis paragraph. Maybe you don't even want to talk about the continuity. Question was, the American Revolution led up to the market because the prompt, right? Okay, so the reason why I'm talking about American Revolution here is because it's I'm giving context to women's roles in America, and I'm gonna be talking about women's roles in the 19th century. So I'm backing it up with what it was like in the 18th century. So that's why I have American Revolution there. But yeah, I know that it says market revolution. That will come up in the thesis. Okay, so the complexity paragraph, you've got a choice, and you can either have it, you know, let's say, oh my God, that is bright. Let's say it's, you know, it's going to be blue, and you can either choose to do a continuity paragraph or a synthesis paragraph. If you did a synthesis paragraph, what would that look like? So obviously a continuity paragraph would be, you know, the continuity you came up with, lack of political rights. You could just write a whole paragraph about the lack of political rights as a continuity. Sweet. I'm glad that you feel better about them. You just need like a formula, you know? The synthesis, you could just choose one of these things. So you could have, you know, you're arguing that there were more labor opportunities for women. Okay, so if, let's say that, when's another time in US history when there were more labor opportunities for women? any time in U.S. history. Yeah, World War II or the First World War. More labor opportunities for women. Let's say World War II. So let's say, so in order to, yeah, you could even talk about the Civil War, any war, really, right? So in terms of writing a synthesis paragraph, this is what it would look like. And I'm not going to do the continuity paragraph for right now because it will look the same as your other ones. And we'll do one of the other ones. So the synthesis paragraph will basically be set up like this. This is not the only time in American history that women had more work opportunities available to them in a, like, I don't know, quick amount, in a short amount of time. I'm trying to think of like the like key thing there. It's not the only time in American history that women had more work opportunities because of changes in, I don't know, because of, can't really say technology. Would you say that any other time in American history that there's more opportunities for women because of changes in technology? Because of, just trying to see like what we're really arguing here. I mean, the market revolution is industrialization. I mean, you could talk about automation here, but let's say, okay, so let's just try to keep it simple. This is not the only time in American history that women had more work opportunities because of like larger societal shifts. I don't know, whatever. Then you say, you know, larger need for goods. Yeah, okay, that's good. That one's good. Because of a increased demand for goods. Yeah, exactly. During World War II, the demand for goods as a result of war mobilization required women to work in factories and gave them more opportunities. In this time, men were also off fighting on the front lines, which, you know, opened up opportunities to work in factories. Industrialization required more output to compete with the world. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so we could even say, you know, the therefore women. Exactly. So, you know, like let's just go with this for a second. Yeah, so let's talk about this. Yeah, there's definitely competition for sure. And so then you would just tie it exactly how you have it, right? Just like the market revolution increased competition for global, or increased global competition for goods. I don't know. The World War also increased global competition for like war production, and women benefited, war resources benefited from this shift. So, okay, so, you know, synthesis is not always perfect, but I think you can see what we're doing, right? Like we're choosing one of the things that we're arguing, and we're just going to show how that happened in another time or another place. You could even use outside of the US. You don't have to even talk about the US in this paragraph. So this paragraph is just going to be a couple sentences where it's like, this is not the only time in American history that, this is not the only time in history that, and then you just kind of input here your argument, something from your thesis, and then you show how that happened, right? Why that happened another in another way. Maybe even add another sentence in here kind of explaining that. And then you just loop it back in the last sentence. Just like the thing you're arguing, this other thing was similar. So this right here would give you, sure, I'll show you. So you could do it this way, and this would look like, this would be synthesis, and that's fine. If there are some prompts though, like the reason why they took synthesis off the rubric is because there's some prompts that it just doesn't work as well for. It's just kind of hard. So as you're trying to figure out how am I going to get the complexity point, you have to kind of decide how you want to go about it. If you read the prompt and you have your thesis and you're like, dude, I've got this, I can definitely see I know of another example of this thing happening, then go for it. Do synthesis, get the point that way. If you can't really think of another time that happened, then don't worry about synthesis. You don't have to do it. So if you were to write the continuity paragraph, it's going to be set up the exact same way as all your other body paragraphs, only this time you're talking about continuity. So, let's say one time in AP World 5, my classmate copied off a dude's synthesis because the prompt was crazy hard to have a synthesis. Yeah, that makes sense. Continuity. It's really hard in some aspects. Like last year for AP World, the prompt, like they really screwed you guys over because the prompt was like in all of the world in this giant time period, and then like, how are you supposed to do synthesis when it's so much time and place? Exactly. So they really messed it up. Whereas, and then like nobody got the synthesis point, like nationally, internationally. And so then they sort of were like, oh, okay, maybe we'll just not do that. So if you were to do a continuity paragraph, you might just start it as, it's just your counter argument. So it's just your like, although women had more opportunities as a result of the market revolution, there was still a lack of political rights or any, so lack of political rights. And then you give some evidence, right? I'm not going to write it all right now just for time, but let's say, in this paragraph, you'd give some evidence. So maybe you'd say, no right to vote or to like run for office. And then you would just talk about that. And you would really include this paragraph, same thing, a couple sentences where you're just kind of showing the counter argument. And that is giving you complexity. Basically, in this whole section, they want to see that you not only understand this one argument that you're trying to make, but that that you understand that there's like a larger development at play, right? So like that you can take this and you can extend it. You can say, wow, this is similar to this other time in history. Or, even though I'm arguing this one thing, I do see the other side of this too. And that's kind of what that will look like. Okay. So my suggestion to you is to put that paragraph, whatever it's going to look like, right after your intro. And that's going to hit, now you've got 3 points in 2 paragraphs. And then your body paragraphs will look like, this is where you're really going to pick up the evidence and the analysis points. You got three points left to get. You have 2 evidence. Can I say, although there were many changes, a layer of complexity is put into play when political rights remained a continuity? Yeah, you can say that. It's just going to come down to more what you're actually arguing. So like that alone won't give you the complexity point. You would need this paragraph to prove your point. Give some other clear examples of how political rights didn't change and why that was a problem. And here you could even talk about Seneca Falls, right? As an example of a lack of political rights, right? There's like reform movements happening. Would you put complexity paragraph at the beginning or end? I would put it right here. I would put it right after the intro. I know it like totally works as a conclusion, but you're writing a timed essay, like if you were writing an essay that like a 10-page essay, I would say that complexity would go at the end. but you're writing a timed essay. So your best bet is to do your intro, get 2 points in your intro, and then do your complexity paragraph and get another point. And then go into your body paragraphs, where you're trying to pick up the 2 evidence points and the 1 other analysis point. So the way your body paragraphs will be set up, all of them can start, one way that women's lives changed as a result of the market revolution was increased opportunities in factories. Okay, so that right there is going to help you get your other analysis point, actually. And then you would just kind of explain out some evidence that relates to that. So maybe in this paragraph, you would talk about, I don't know, what would you use to prove that? The Lowell system, right? You could use just like factory system in general, Sam Slater, or, Eli Whitney, like new tech. This is kind of where you're giving evidence. You want to have at least 2 or 3 pieces of evidence in each body paragraph. And by pieces of evidence, I mean key terms. Okay. That's where like Quizlet and stuff is going to be useful for you, or the Romulus apps, because those help you with evidence points. And so you'd want, you mentioned Sam Slater, that's going to be evidence. You mentioned Eli Whitney, that's evidence. If you mention the Lowell system, that's evidence. So if you explain each of those things, then you're going to get 2 pieces of evidence. If you just drop them and list them, then you could get 1. So you want to explain them each, not just say that, well, there was a Lowell system. Explain what it was and explain how it benefited women. But isn't there a discrepancy when there was a factory opportunity for women, yet the cult of domesticity forced women at home? Yeah, there is. There is a discrepancy here. But at the same time, the question is asking how women's roles changed. And there's like a dichotomy, because even though there's more opportunities for women, there's also a push to not allow that. Like kind of what we're talking about before. Anytime you see there being more of something, there's going to be pushback on it. Okay. Yeah, but it's something that you can talk about here. Okay. So yeah, there you go. And then so more women are being forced to stay at home. And then you would just give 1 more sentence that explains it. Why were there more opportunities? Well, you could think about the fact that new agricultural technologies led to a surplus and like less demand for labor on farms, right? So that means that some of the daughters of farmers can go work in a factory and they don't need to be working on the farm as much, right? The father can do it all on his own with the technology. And something like that would help you get that analysis point. So this is how your body paragraphs would go. Each paragraph would be set up like this. You'd have a topic sentence, you'd have evidence and explain, and then you'd have a last thing of like, why did that happen? Why was there increased opportunities? Why was there a cult of domesticity? Whatever it is that you're actually arguing. All right, what do you think? Do you feel like better about LEQs? Do you still have questions about them? No, you don't need a conclusion. So in your conclusion, you can restate your thesis. You want to restate it because if you don't get, okay, so do your 2 body paragraphs and then you can just be done. You could write another body paragraph if you have it, but you don't need the actual conclusion. You can just restate the thesis, because if you get the thesis if you get it incorrect in the intro, if you do something wrong in the intro and they don't want to give you the point here, the first thing they're going to do is look at your conclusion. You can have a thesis in there and get that correct and get the point. So rewrite your thesis in a different way, just kind of reorganize it. A lot of times too, like after you're finished writing an essay, then you have a really clear idea of what you wanted to argue because now you've written it. And so making that the last sentence, I would use that as a lone sentence at the end. Make that like, write it as if it were a conclusion, but you just don't need, like, you know how sometimes you start conclusions with like, in conclusion, there were many changes that happened because of the market revolution. Like, you just don't need that sentence. Just do the thesis again and then be done. Yeah, it can just be it. 1 to 2 sentence conclusion that's just a restated thesis. Body paragraphs times 2. And so you do 2 like this. Okay. The biggest thing to know is just that like every single sentence should be tied to a point. So, you know, if you write a sentence that's, I'm just gonna make myself a little bit bigger here. If you write a sentence that you don't see a clear attachment to a point, that's a problem, right? Like you want to make sure that every single sentence that you write is either getting you a point or helping you get a point. And it, you know, beyond that, you don't have to write anymore. It is a long essay question, but it doesn't have to be that long, you know, like really tie yourself down to the rubric because, you know, they keep saying this. It's like, as just a teacher, as a human in this world, like I don't like teaching in a way that's just about the points, because obviously I want you to be better writers in general. However, you're taking a test that has a specific rubric and you're trying to pass that test. So you got to play the game, you know? So it's not about writing a nice essay like you would in an English class, or if you were writing a history essay, you know, outside of class, that can look really nice and sound really nice. But for this, it's just like, do the things that you have to do and then be done. I don't know. That's my suggestion. All right. Any other questions on LEQs? We'll be practicing LEQs again towards the end. After we've done another time period, we'll do LEQs again. But next weekend, we're going to focus on DBQs because DBQs are where things get messy. But super important that you understand LEQs. But wait, so I forgot to just kind of mention, you can see how this kind of looks like ACE, right? This is your A. This is your C. And then this is an E. Right? So there's 2 points for evidence. They give you, okay, so they give you 1 point on the rubric just for mentioning the correct evidence that you need to, for bringing up evidence and using that to support your argument. There's another point that you can earn by explaining that evidence. So you want to go for that. You want to explain any evidence that you have because it's a lot easier to shoot for that one and miss it than to just shoot for the first one and miss that, you know? So explain everything. Yep, and then same thing with complexity. Totally worth it to write that paragraph and try to get the point. I mean, that's the thing. Like I was saying with the rubric, there's 6 points. Try to get them all. Do everything you can to get all 6. And if you shoot for 6 and you miss, you know, then you end up with a 4 or 5. But if you take any of the points, you're like, I'm just not going to do that one. Then you're already like starting off lower. So shoot for all of them and try to get every point that you possibly can. All right. Any other questions on LEQs? Where does the final complexity point come from? That's your synthesis or your continuity. That's that bonus that paragraph right after your intro. That's where it comes from. They give you a list of ways that you can get it. The easiest 2 ways are synthesis and to do like a counter argument. To do, if the question asks for causes, you do a paragraph about effects. If the paragraph asks for similarities, you do a paragraph about differences. Download the Quizlet app or whatever, or the Romulus APUSH app. I keep talking about that one just because I know that one is just like practice questions that are only evidence points. And so it's not just like long stimulus-based ones. So yeah, cram stuff, but like focus on key terms, okay? And we'll get into period 6 next weekend. All right. So until next week, if you have any questions, just hit me up and I'll see you guys later. Bye.